Welcome to Retirement Unlimited. I'm Jeremiah Lee, and this is Randy Barkley. We're both certified financial planners. I'm also a California licensed attorney. We work together at Tricord Advisors, where we help clients build the life they love.
So here's the question. We've talked about, the what's happened with bonds going from 2020 and 2021 and now into 2022 and the volatility they've experienced. So do we just kick bonds out of our portfolio going forward?
It's a great question. And some folks have. There's a number of advisors that portfolios we work with and other advisors. And so the thought is to say, we don't need these. They're not helpful. They're not stable like we thought they were. They don't have the growth, the recovery that stocks do. Let's get rid of them. And so some people have moved towards dividend paying stocks. And I think there's parts of that that's great. There's some stocks that they go up and down and you trade the prices. They don't pay you anything. You just hold them. And eventually when you sell them, like say Tesla, you bought it at one moment, eventually you'll sell it and you make the difference there. And hopefully it's an increase.
Hopefully it's a capital gain.
Yeah. But there's other stocks like Microsoft that pays out a regular dividend. They're usually a more established company that has extra income. They have extra cash and they can't use it all for R&D or acquisitions or different things. And so that because of that, they push it back out to their shareholders and they'll do it usually each quarter. So there's some stocks that you buy at a certain price and you're excited as it goes up and trades in the market. But even if it stays flat, or even doesn't change, you're going to get a monthly or quarterly payment as a dividend. So some people will look at this and say, hey, this Microsoft stock is just as good as a stock because it's getting some price appreciation. Oh, sorry, just as a stock because it's going up and down, and also just as good as a bond because they're paying me every quarter. No matter what happens, I'm getting this amount. There's some logic to that.
There is.
The negatives could be the dividends aren't guaranteed. They could just stop doing that whenever they felt it was appropriate.
We saw some companies, during the COVID, we saw some companies pull back. We saw companies in 2008 where they were under phenomenal financial pressure and stress. And they said they're going to either reduce their dividends or stop paying dividends entirely.
Which if someone was holding a stock purely because they wanted the dividend, and now they're not going to pay a dividend, well, what? Do you have to turn up my portfolio? Where's the stability? Where's that? So that's one idea, is that people will just move to dividend paying stocks as a replacement of bonds. Others will just move to cash and say it's a stability in my portfolio. And so when times are uncertain, I'm going to have 10% just in cash. Or when I say cash, I mean, I guess cash equivalents, very short-term treasuries, high yield savings, things like that. Some people do that. They say, I just don't need the bonds. I'm going to use something else entirely. And a third option that I think is where we see more people leaning towards is either getting a fund, an ETF or a mutual fund that they're excited about, that has either actively managed or even passively managed, but it has the right duration, is being cultivated. But the other one is laddering. And laddering, we'll talk a little bit what that means. But
so laddering is a way in which you structure your purchases. So you might want to open that up a little bit more for our audience.
So
how does that work?
Just think of a ladder, one step at a time, going all the way up.
One rung.
One rung. That's a better way to put it. And so someone would buy maybe a bond that matures in a month, and then another one that matures in 2 months, and another one that matures in 3 months. So they have these 3 steps. Well, as the first one matures and ends, they'll buy another 3 month. And then as that second one, the 2 month long, buy another 3 month. They just keep buying those. So eventually they just get this regular rotation. They're just buying 3 month bonds. And when they buy it, they'll hold it for 3 months and it matures.
And each bond, I think it's important for our listeners to understand, each bond that you purchase has an interest. It pays interest. So typically the lower rung, the first level, pays a little bit less interest than the higher rung, the very top of the ladder. And you're automatically overcoming the risk of the rising interest rates, the duration risk that you have.
And people do this with bonds as most common. People also do this with CDs at a bank. Often you can buy a 2-year CD at a much higher interest rate than you would for a 3-month CD. And so people would say, well, why would I even do that? Well, in seasons like this, where interest rates are going up, you want to get that real short duration, and you just step up with it, up. Well, even when interest rates start going back down, the bond ladder or the CD ladder, the structure doesn't change. It's just you change the duration. So if you get to the top of the ladder, interest rates are now getting less and less. So each new bond you buy doesn't pay you as much as the last one did. You're just getting as long as you can. They're getting these 10-year bonds and then a 10-year bond and have these big long steps. So the idea of laddering is say that I want this money to be in the best bonds I can have it in, the best mix of bonds all the time. And rather than doing a fund, I'm going to do this myself. Before ETFs and some of these mutual funds were popular, that's how people did it years ago. They'd ladder all their bonds. Whereas now people could do it with CDs, people can do it through bonds. They can build these ladders for themselves.
Yeah, and we can help clients. In fact, we've had several clients we've met with that they have cash either from the sale of a business or, a payoff of a house or something like that. And the question is, what do I do with all this cash? They don't want to go into the market because of the volatility and such as that. So one alternative is to buy laddered, or we buy CDs and such, but we can get 4% now.
Yeah.
We can get on very short-term duration holdings.
Yeah. And that's the biggest difference, I think, from a year ago, say.
Right.
A year ago, we're looking at a CD, it's paying you insulting interest. Savings accounts pay you nothing. There wasn't a whole lot of interest in doing this. Whereas now that interest rates have come up for CDs and bonds, they're paying what a lot of people would consider a reasonable rate.
Right.
And so they say, well, I could get, say, 4% in a CD ladder or a bond ladder, or I could go in the market, and man, I've been burned the last 6 months in the market. Yeah, I'll take the ladder and build out a ladder for them.
So a good alternative, if you have long-term bonds right now that have gone down in value, I would go back to my suggestion that I said earlier, don't sell them, but let's take the interest off of that and get into shorter term duration bonds. So you start to build almost an inverse ladder. You're taking your long-term bonds, taking the interest in buying short-term bonds, and you end up getting a higher interest probably on the shorter term bonds than you would on the long term. Again, preservation of capital is really, really important. What I've done for a lot of clients is that I've tried to separate out their total return, taking the bond part of their portfolio and kind of isolating it versus the equity. And most people were kind of surprised that the bond actually performed worse than the equity portion. The equities have held up really well based upon what we've selected for our clients. The bonds are under pressure. There's no question about that. But again, I make this emphasis, don't sell. Bonds heal over time. You just got to allow certain time to occur.
Yep. And having the time. Right. Some people say, well, I need this money now. For majority of investors, they have a timeline that is not immediate. Right. They can wait a year. They can wait 10 years. They can wait 15 years to allow these to develop. And some people, I think us as a society are generally impatient. We want the returns now. We want to see it. We don't know that we're in the best item. But to take a long-term approach really takes a lot of stress out of what your assets have to do today. And to say, okay, over the next 10 years, this is what I want to happen. That's a very different, I think, form, and almost like a peacefulness in investing.
Yeah, because bonds, even though they haven't necessarily performed as well over this year as you would hope that hope that they would, but in the next several years we'll probably have a recession, and that recession will cause bond values and all the underlying intrinsic things that we look at to improve dramatically.
Yep, as people leave stocks because of recession type items, they're probably going to go into bonds, and they'll lift up these prices. So it's not a bad asset. It's just been abused this year.
Right.
And I think there's uncertainty. And I think having a well thought out portfolio, there's risk everywhere. Wherever you go, there's risk.
Right.
It's just knowing that bonds don't have the same risk profile people might have thought 5-10 years ago. Right. And we need to update our expectations of what bonds do and how they work. If you missed any part of this episode or this radio podcast, you can get us on YouTube. You can also find us on our website. It's retirementunlimited.com. And if you have a comment or an item you want us to discuss on a future episode, some question you've been wondering about, go to our website, retirementunlimited.com, and use the comment section and leave us a note.